Welcome to another edition of Sterlo's Wrap. And Pete, 18 rounds are down. How you going? You holding up all right?
I'm getting there. The end is in sight. Gets very exciting, this run into the finals. I have to say, Joel, at the beginning of the season, if you'd have said with 7 games left that South Sydney would be the sole competition leaders and Robert Jennings would be our leading try scorer, I'd have said, well, that's a bit of a stretch.
He scored 8 tries in the last 3 games, Robert Jennings.
Another hat-trick on the weekend. Good on him.
Yeah, and we started on Friday night. Penrith taking on the Sharks. Both these clubs came into the competition together. But Black Cats on Friday the 13th didn't work out, Pete.
No, it didn't. It was unlucky for them, wasn't it? Although a good quality game, this one. Plenty of stars missing. Obviously for the Cronulla side, Jesse Ramian was out, no Luke Lewis. Josh Dugan still yet to come back in, whilst the Origin stars were rested for Penrith. Didn't lose any admirers. I thought Penrith were really competitive in this game. They're going to look stronger on the park in the weeks to come. Cronulla, they're warming up very, very nicely, aren't they? They're playing a nice style of football that's not quite finals football, but getting there. And I guess the ironic thing in this game, if that's the right word, Matt Moylan, the former Panther, was probably the star coming out of this one. Really settled into that number 6 jersey well at Cronulla. There was a little bit of doubt there early on as to whether he'd look comfortable in that role, but very much so. Threw the ball for Valentine Holmes to streak away to score ultimately the winning try. What a week Valentine Holmes has had as well. Unbelievable
player, Valentine Holmes. They'll be doing well to keep him. The Sharkies. The Newcastle Knights took on Parramatta. They almost stole it, but that's 14 losses from their last 17 now for Parramatta.
Yeah, Newcastle looked in trouble early on, didn't they? Some magic footwork here from Jared Hayne, sets up their second try. Beautiful little kick from Bevan French, and Mitchell Moses leads the way. And at that stage, Parramatta, they were cruising, but then some simple errors, play the ball infringements, forward passes, brought Newcastle back into the game. And with Mitchell Pearce leading the way, that was the difference. Yeah, and I think that's the big story coming out of this game was the return of Mitchell Pearce. First 8 weeks, Newcastle won 5 games and they were in the top 8. In Mitchell's absence, the next 8 weeks, they won 1 game. Mitchell comes back into this side, a close game, which is especially where you miss his direction and input, they win it. So I think they have a good end of the season with Mitchell back in the side. Heartbreak for Parramatta, who when you have a look at this play from Bevan French and Corey Norman in basically the final play of the game, this is how close they went to stealing a victory. Everybody, certainly the Parramatta players, thought that Bevan French had scored there. But as we can see, his right boot, as he gathers in the football, just touches the white line. It is so much a game of inches, and on this occasion, those inches counted against the blue and golds. Yeah,
the blue and white, though, well, they took on the Rabbitohs. It was game 150 for Josh Jackson. 9 in a row for Anthony Seibold's Bunnies, Pete.
And a slow start for South Sydney. I thought that they weren't prepared to really roll the sleeves up early. They went from side to side, didn't do the hard work to set themselves up to do that. And Canterbury were very, very competitive in this game. I think the scoreline belies just how much they were in this game. But once South's got a bit of momentum, got on a little bit of a roll, then they started to assert their superiority. Another good win. That's 9 in a row now. It's the 8th time in their history that they've achieved that mark. I think you'll find on 6 occasions, no, that's the 8th time. On 6 occasions, they went on to win the premiership.
Premiers.
That augurs really well for them. But there was a key moment in this game, and during my wrap today, I'm going to look at a couple of refereeing decisions. This one was a key one. It's Marshall King reaching out to get the football down. Sam Burgess knocks it out. It bounces back to Aidan Tolman. Now, the ruling here is that Tolman touches it into Cody Walker. I've looked at it a lot of times. I didn't quite think that was the way that it unfolded. Aidan Tolman did a great job to get that football down. Now, if Aidan Tolman scores that try, it's 18-12, and maybe South Sydney started to get a little bit nervous. But in the end, the better side won, and that's all we can hope for. And South Sydney on top of the competition ladder now on their own after the Dragons' loss.
Because they've won 9 in a row, people are probably forgetting about the Melbourne Storm. They've won 6 in a row now, including a bye. So they're on their heels, the Melbourne Storm. This game had its own controversy, a penalty goal late for the Melbourne Storm. Accidental offside, many people are saying.
Well, it was. No, it was the right call. It was the right call. We'll get to that in a moment because they started really well, the Manly side at Brookvale. Wasn't quite the Battle of Brookvale, but it was willing to power and Fanua Blake very, very good early on. Sean Lane crossing for a double. So they had some work to do for Melbourne, but as we've seen in that 6-week period you're talking about, Cameron Smith took control, worked his team back into the contest. Number of changes for them, obviously. and despite trailing 13-6 at the break, they were able to go on and win this game. Now, the incident that you're talking about, which was basically the penalty goal to win the game, kick goes up, comes off Vunivalu, it hits Trent Hodkinson on the head and goes forward. Now, once Joel Thompson plays at that football, it becomes a deliberate play.
Yes.
And so I have no doubt that the referee got it right, and that whilst it's difficult for Manly fans, Trent Barrett was particularly perturbed by it, I believe that he got the call right.
Yep.
Heartbreak for Manly.
So accidental by Hodkinson, but it's the Joel Thompson intention.
Exactly. Once he picks it up in an offside position intentionally, it is a penalty. That was converted by Cameron Smith. They win by 1, and they continue that marvellous stretch during Origin football where they got the job done every week.
Well, I'll tell you what, depending on how the Raiders season finishes up, injury will play a part in that, because you think about the games they could have won with Hodgson and now they lose Jarrod Croker.
They do, and it's a key blow, and this was a really good performance, and the score line shows that they were pretty dominant over another disappointing North Queensland side this week. Tough conditions down there. I think it was in the negatives.
That was the team to play, wasn't it?
That's different than what they would have experienced in Townsville of late, but no excuse down there. And I thought Canberra, again, the longer this game went, the better that they looked. Ran up a good score line, and when Canberra get on a roll, I don't know if there's any team in the competition who are harder than stop. Now, they've lost a lot of close games this year. That might come back to haunt them, but they knew that they were going to be, if they won this game, 4 points out of the 8, because either Brisbane or the Warriors were going to get beaten because they played each other, outside of a draw, of course, which was highly unlikely. So it was a huge 2 competition points for them. But as you pointed out, Jack Whiten suspended, out for 10 weeks, probably won't see him back. And this incident here for Jarrod Croker just shows his toughness. He is really one of the unsung heroes of our competition, a silent achiever. Goes down there, that's where I think the dislocation happens, and it's fairly innocuous, isn't it? Now, he stays on the field, he battles away, he gets it strapped up, he's a leader, both physically and mentally for them. The left side defence is much better than their right side defence. Sets up a try for Michael Roberts minutes later, stays down. He's not right. Other players put the hand up and get out, and this was the final moment where no play within him, no contact, he goes down and he was forced off the field. But he was out there for another 15 odd minutes, 20 minutes. Shows his toughness. They've got a good backup goal kicker in Aidan Caesar, but he's a leader on the back of Whiten. If that charge that we think that they can make has been hurt a little bit by the fact they won't have their inspirational captain there to do so.
We'll never know either, but had he come off immediately, I wonder whether he may have been back. We'll never know. But anyway, you mentioned they would have been watching the Broncos-Warriors clash with interest. Could you believe this scoreline, Pete?
No, I couldn't. And no, they played great, and this is the Warriors to some degree, isn't it? They were so poor last week. They have the ability to come out and play their best football, and we've seen some really good football from them. I'm one person who thought Brisbane win this game. I know that they've been affected by Origin football, whereas the Warriors not at all. So, they're primed for a good showing. But in the back of your mind, you keep thinking of the Warriors from last week, and they couldn't come out and do this in such an important game. So now it's the Brisbane side who've got a concern. They've got a tough contest this week against the Panthers. If they lose that one, all of a sudden they might possibly just be 2 points in front of the Raiders if they can get the job done as well, and things get very, very tight. Wayne Bennett came out and said, look, there's always these kind of showing during the course of the season. Yes, we're disappointed, but we are still in a good position. He didn't seem too concerned by it. He'll be more concerned if they get rolled this weekend. Absolutely,
and the Tigers are another team who have a pulse too. They took on the Dragons at Cogra. Now, they very rarely lose there, but this was a brilliant display from the Tigers.
Yes, and it was the old firm, and I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but it was.
Yeah.
You've got Benji Marshall back in alongside Robbie Farah. The inclusion of Moses Mbai at fullback really makes this West Tigers look a much more formidable outfit. The only concern I do have is they've got to make sure that Luke Brooks doesn't kind of get lost in the wash a little bit. He kind of wasn't as prominent in this game, but having said that, it was an outstanding performance from the West Tigers. The Dragons have now lost 2 in a row.
Yes.
Their Origin players did back up, and in fact I thought were probably their better players. I thought Vaughan and Tyson Frizzell were outstanding for them. But they looked a little bit off the pace, against the West Tigers team who've been barren with their victories of late, but really found some form in this one. I just want to show a passage of play here in the second half, Joel, where I think it sets up the victory to some degree. Now, Kurt Mann makes a mistake. The Tigers get the football. It's 18-6. We see one forced restart. Now, these are back-to-back. This is how it happened in the game. This is the end of the next set. Luke Brooks comes up with the same thing, keeps the pressure on, applies the screws. Now, let's get Benji Marshall involved as well. He gets one through. The frustration of having to defend all of those resulted in Gareth Widdop trying to take a short drop out. The ball carries too far. The scoreline now becomes 20 points to 6. Psychologically, that's a huge blow landed because the Dragons know they need to score 3 times to win this game. Now, they scored twice, but those two penalty goal points, I think, were kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and it was built on perfect build-up of pressure by the chief key makers from the West Tigers. It was lovely to watch. Because
they knew, didn't they, that Gareth knew they couldn't hold on defensively for another set.
They needed the football back. They hadn't seen it for way too long, and they got the restart wrong. So the West Tigers, they earned that. That's what I'm trying to say.
And Gareth, you didn't get away with it because bad haircuts lead to bad performances. We saw that with Nelson Asofa-Solomona.
We saw it with Andrew Johns.
We saw it with Andrew Johns.
Brookvale with his orange hair.
You lose games with bad haircuts, Pete. There's no question about that. These debutants, they were rushed in for Trent Robinson's side, Paul Momirovski, Puasa Faumasili and Sean O'Sullivan. And all three, Pete, they all score on debut.
First time we've seen it in Premiership history, and what a wonderful night for all of those 3 players. We'll have a look at the Sean O'Sullivan try in a little while here. But again, I thought a disappointing performance from the Gold Coast Titans up against the Roosters outfit that was far from at full strength. Their origin players didn't back up. Boyd Cordner was rested out of this game. So I thought it was a perfect opportunity because I'm a fan of the Gold Coast Titans. I watched them win 2 in a row and look very strong in doing so. But their last 2 performances have been pretty poor, and that's been disappointing for Garth Brennan. Having said that, some obvious frustration for Garth with this try awarded to Sean O'Sullivan. I think everybody who watched it realised that this is not a try. You know, he does push the ball back into the post, but it doesn't just roll down the upright. It comes out. He propels the ball forward. And I guess to add to that frustration is the referee's boss, Bernie Sutton, comes out the next day and said, yes, we got that wrong. Didn't help the Gold Coast Titans. I don't think it was a game that they were going to go on and win, but just puts a little bit of a sour taste for the side that was beaten. But take nothing away from the Roosters, who again, with a very different looking side to what we'll see in the coming weeks, went up there, got the job done against a potentially dangerous football team. And puts them in the 4 now. So you've got the Bunnies on top 28, Melbourne Storm and the Dragons 26, 4 teams on 24, Roosters, Penrith, Cronulla and the Warriors, and the Broncos hanging on to the top 8 there on 22. That's Sterlo's wrap for round 18. We'll see you after round 19.